Navigating an archive can appear a little overwhelming at first, so this is why understanding how to interpret and use a finding aid is important. Archives often contain unique material, such as letters, photographs, wills, or diaries, which were created for personal or internal use as part of business or the everyday life of an organisation. In general, archives are made of materials that are not published. Instead of arranging materials by subject, archivists try to preserve the original order of materials, which reflects the way their creator used them. Finding aids for materials and special collections can usually be found on the archive website or on the Archives Hub. They're a bit like an inventory or a table of contents. There's a lot of useful information you can get from a finding aid. Let's look at the Chatsworth Archive as an example. If you were interested in finding out more about Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire, you could visit the Chatsworth House Archives. I'm going to look for family papers. And then I'm going to look at the Cavendish and Devonshire family collections. As I scroll down, I can see the different members of the Cavendish family. And here is Georgiana Cavendish, Duchess of Devonshire. So let's view the finding aid. At the top of the finding aid, you'll find information about the archives. And then we have some biographical information. This is followed by who created the collection, in this case Georgiana Cavendish, when it was acquired, and also the scope and content of the collection. The scope gives you an idea of what kinds of materials are in the collection, in this case notebooks, poetry manuscripts and scrapbooks. The system of arrangement is important to help you identify what there is and how it's arranged. Access arrangements can tell you how you can visit the archive, and they often include any restrictions that might exist, such as copyright restrictions or certain restrictions imposed by the donors or creators. Some collections have restrictions imposed by law in the case of medical or educational records, and some collections don't have any restrictions at all. When you're doing research, it's very important for you to understand what the restrictions are before you start using the collection. Extent tells you the size of the collection, in this case 2 boxes. For some archives, this will be measured in linear feet. Think of that as boxes of papers lined up side by side. The language of the material is also listed, which is important as you don't want to turn up and find that you can't read the material. There is a preferred citation, which is important for when you cite the material within your essay. There is also related material, which is very useful as sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you browse other sources. The finding aid lists the material and organises it into series. In this case, DF12-1 is notebooks, scrapbooks and keepsakes of Georgiana Cavendish. Series 1 is where the poetry is kept, and Series 2, which is further down, is where the scrapbooks are. Each series includes a list of items beneath it, which are the individual archival items. Inventories can vary in scope. Sometimes collections are described in great detail, including a précis of the item, and sometimes the information is very brief. This completes this video on finding aids.